Hello there. My name's Colin Livingston. I will be the host of Talking Torque. I'm glad that you're taking a look at this here tonight. Sent out a bio earlier today, a little bit of an introduction of what to expect. My life basically revolves around two things. I own a business called Cantork, a very proud owner of our little industrial manufacturing company. And the rest of the time, I race. I still work as a crew member with a NASCAR Pinty Series team. I still actively put my helmet on and get to race my go karts. I own a company called CRG Racing, which is the factory distribution point for CRG race carts. So I sell parts and pieces and help support other racers. Cantork is a industrial manufacturing company. We specialize in hydraulic torque tools, hydraulic stud tensioners, nut runners, impact sockets, mechanical torque tools, basically anything you'd ever use to tighten and loosen an industrial fastener. And was approached by my good friend Dean Blundell. We sort of accidentally got tricked into doing these podcasts through my other good friend, Mr. Lachlan Cross, when last year we were getting ready to promote the NASCAR race that's held here just outside Edmonton at Edmonton International Raceway in Wetaskiwin. Approached Locke about trying to get my driver, Alex Tagliani, on the radio show, and he suggested that the radio show might not be the best venue, but that we should maybe jump on his podcast. And candidly, I didn't know an awful lot about podcasts. I didn't know what the reach would be, and definitely didn't know anything about Dean being an Edmontonian. I wasn't really exposed to Toronto radio. But that first day back in July, we had a great time. It was a lot of fun, and then through that, was able to start following some of the podcasts that Dean was doing. Actually, became a show sponsor, and now somehow, some way, here we are to talk about the behind the scenes of my worlds of business and racing. And hopefully in time we find a few people that are interested in watching, and we can have some good discussions, bring on some good guests, and show you kind of what life's like behind the scenes. Now, I've got to be equally honest. I don't know if my bigger fear is that no one will watch, or that we'll get people watching and have to keep exposing ourselves to to comments and questions and things like that. But I'm a little anxious. I'm definitely excited. This has been a lot of work in the making, and really looking forward to being able to discuss these things. So today is going to be kind of the worst of the bunch. At least I hope so. Being that really today it's just me and talking about myself. Not overly comfortable with that. I'd prefer to have a conversation, but this is how we get things going, and hopefully my skills will improve as time goes on. No stranger to talking about things. I do a weekly radio show here on TSN Edmonton. With regard to motorsports, we do lots of interviews. We as a crew member with a relatively well-known professional driver. Over the years, we've done all kinds of radio, print, TV. That part's not so, not uncomfortable, but, to spend some time here tonight just talking about myself and my story without being able to gauge anyone's reaction is certainly a new sensation. So I'll go back. One of the more pivotal days in my life, and I'll never forget, was October 26, 2000. I'll get back to that day, but my life in industrial sales and what eventually led to where I'm at here with Cantork started back in 1994. I went on a fishing trip. Kind of sounds like a line from a Tragically Hip song, but a true story that my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife, her uncle, Uncle Ed, ended up inviting me on a fishing trip. And while I thought I was actually just getting invited out on a fishing trip, it actually turned out to be a job interview where he was trying to size me up. Leanne and I, who again, Leanne is my at the time girlfriend, then became wife, and now became ex-wife. Um, Leanne and I had become engaged, and Uncle Ed basically wasn't too satisfied with my career at the time, being a an industrial carpet cleaner. Took me on a trip just to size me up and figure out if I had any mechanical or cognitive wherewithal. And apparently, he saw something that I didn't know was there at the time, but. Um, Went on the fishing trip, and as we traveled back and forth to South Buck Lake, he made an offer and said, "Hey, would you like to come work for the company I manage? Here's what we'll pay. You'll basically start as a laborer and go from there." And told me about some of the upside of industrial work. I honestly didn't know anything, but it was going to be very cool for me to get behind the scenes and actually see how some of these industrial plants that I grew up with around the city, and coal mines that I never knew how they operated, to get to be a part of that. So that's where I started in 1994. And from the time I walked into that business, I took to it like a duck to water. Some reason, everything lined up, and I was able to really conceptualize what we were doing, the physics and the science behind the tools we were operating, and really it was a business that was a mechanical or a service arm of exactly what I'm doing now. Now we manufacture tools, but back in the day, we would take torque tools, tensioning tools, ultrasonics, and we would go to plant sites, and we'd go to field locations, and we would be, contracted to help customers put things together and take them apart. Again, starting as a laborer, my very first day, I got called in to be a helper in Spruce Grove at what was then called Nova Pipeline. Worked with two really great guys who were very patient, but taught me pretty quickly about how tensioning worked, and how to put them on, how to be safe. From there, the next kind of significant step in my evolution was getting to go out on a project, which nowadays none of these companies exist, but we went out to Fording Coal, which is now under a different name. We worked on a Marion 8750 drag line, which Marion is no longer a separate company. And I got introduced to a gentleman named Don Clary. Now, I will remember Don for the rest of my days. Don was in my industrial world. Don was, or is, as influential as Uncle Ed was, because Don did something that I would never have expected. I was still a junior technician when we got called on to his job site, and we were only out to do ultrasonic measurement of certain fasteners that were on the drag line. And for those of you who don't know, fasteners are simply, in our world, are either a stud or a bolt. And in the case of the 8750, we were working on what's called a gear segment. So it had these 1 7/8 fasteners that we would ultrasonically measure when they were loose. The crew would come in, would tighten everything. We would measure everything again ultrasonically to confirm that everything was tight. And we could confirm to the customer, who was Fording Coal at the time, that yes, everything was done properly. And away we go. And again, I was really just an assistant. But because I had a fairly good, technical base, I was able to answer a lot of the questions that the senior representative wasn't able to. And, guys like Don Clary, and I'm only throwing this out just to show when somebody's had a positive influence on my life, I don't forget who they are. So the Don Clary was the representative from Fort and Cole, or pardon me, from Marion. He was the dragline representative, and Don Clary um, is easily one of the most recognizable names, at least in Western Canada, in the mining industry for equipment, because Don's kind of done it all and seen it all. Um, the Fort and Cole rep immediately that I represent, or that I had contact with, was a guy named Bob Matthew, and then his immediate supervisor was a guy named Hugh Blackstock. And I had the good fortune of getting to work with those guys for many years. And in fact, while I've lost contact with Bob and Hugh, I still talk to Don to this day. But the monumental movement for me was, I was, we did our work on site, and then somehow, some way, I got a phone call at home. Now, at the time, I was only about, I don't know, 2021. I was still living with my parents. It was a Friday evening. Phone rang. My mother answered the phone and said, there's a what seems to be a fairly angry man on the other end. And, while Don maybe has a temper, he just has a fairly aggressive voice. So I get on the phone, and he's like, "Hey, Colin, it's Clary." Like, I don't know who Clary is. So I keep talking. He tells me, reminds me that I just did some work for him, and that I needed to get back to the site to do some more measurement that night. They had a bit of an emergency failure, and couldn't wait until we could make things happen. And without thinking, I said, "Okay, no problem. I'll be out there as soon as I can. I have to go pick up some gear." I had no idea how to how to get into our shop. I had no idea who to contact. I didn't have a company vehicle. I didn't know how to fill out a time slip. I just knew that I wanted to help the guy out. Call Uncle Ed up. Uncle Ed puts me in touch with somebody else who gets me into the shop, who gets me access to the company van, loads up the ultrasonic unit. And by about 9 o'clock that night, I was back out on site. And now I'm working individually, and I'm working independently. And now I'm the direct representative for my company with this mining company. Um, that automatically propelled me. I'd only been with my company for probably only 6 or 8 months, and now all of a sudden I was being entrusted to do these projects, and that led to me doing some international work with our U.S. offices, and really set me on a pretty fast path to being successful, and eventually that got me into sales. Through a series of really bad decisions, I actually left that company, which I honestly regret to this day, because I followed some pretty bad advice and made some really bad decisions, but ultimately learned from those mistakes. Also discovered that my nature is that of a survivor, meaning that yes, I'll make bad mistakes and bad things may happen, but my instinct is to just keep going. And as I'll say on more than one occasion, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I never claim to be the smartest person in the world, but one of my strengths is that I have the ability to wake up in the morning, put my jeans on, and put one foot in front of the other. No matter how bad things get, I can keep moving. And that has served me very well over the years. Flash forward a little bit, make a series of bad decisions, end up getting hired by a Montreal-based company, who tried to get access to Alberta, and had different levels of success here. Um, I had done some work with them at a distance. A friend of mine became one of their salesmen. We were able to rent a few tools. Oddly enough, I was renting the tools back to the same power plant across the road from the coal mine that really proved to be my first breaking point. And then eventually, he left the company. I was hired onto the company, and became their first, full time, Alberta based rep. to the point that they were comfortable enough to build an office around me. Within the first year and a bit, we became one of the fastest growing, highest profiting offices that company actually had. We ran at incredibly high profit ratios, and our numbers were astounding. By the last the last full year that I was with that office, we were the highest profiting office by total dollar amount, and without question, we were the fastest growing. And that leads to October 26th of 2000. Um, I was, happily married. We had our first son, our first child, which was my son Parker. He had just turned 1 year old on October 16th. And by the time we got to October 26th, I had found out that despite the success we were having within the business, I was terminated. Wasn't really given an honest answer as to what happened. But as I earlier alluded to, I am a survivor, and I didn't really think. I was very confused because I hadn't had a professional disappointment in my life to that point. I didn't even own a vehicle at that point. I was driving a company car, um, which I had to leave behind, and got a ride from my employee. Um, while it might not seem right, positive Mike, it is 100% correct. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot that I could do about it. But we moved on. I dust myself off, and on my way home. Well, I had no idea that this was coming. And the way I was fired and the way I knew I was going to be gone is that when I showed up to my office that morning, the president of the company was sitting in my office at my desk, and he didn't tell me that he was going to come out. So I knew the only reason that he would fly from Montreal to Edmonton without telling me was that he was there to axe me. It was a really quick conversation. I'll never forget it. And I said to him, I reiterated to him what I said at numerous times, that I didn't want to be somewhere that I wasn't wanted, and if they didn't want me, no matter what, I was happy to leave. On the way home, again, I was quite blindsided. I told my who was an employee, but now just my lifetime counterpart, Sheldon, that I needed to make a couple stops. I stopped at Petro Canada on 51st Ave, just west of Calgary Trail in Edmonton, made a phone call to my existing supplier, told them what happened. They said that they were going to support me. I made a second stop to my father-in-law, who was a business owner, Don Campbell, the owner of Campbell Automotive. Has been with Don and with Uncle Ed, actually more instrumental in my business career. Stopped and talked to him and said, "You'll never guess what happened." And he says, "Well, what's that?" I said, "Well, I was fired." And I had a big shit-eating grin on my face. And he said, "You seem to be taking it pretty well." And I said, "I don't know why. I've never failed at anything professionally in my life, but I have a sense that I've just been released." He said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know, but I figured out how to make this thing work for them. There's no reason why I can't make it work for myself." He said, "Okay, fine. I'm going to talk to Gail, my mother-in-law, and we'll get back to you with what we can do." Now, I had this, this idea that I was going to get a lot of money to start a thing. But as it turns out, the offer was I could have a section of space within Don's shop. And he wouldn't charge me any rent. I could set up a shelf. I had a workbench. Um, if I can figure out how to use this software, this was the beginning of Cantork. I had a single section of shelf. This was actually quite a ways into this was probably a month or two into Cantork's start, where I'd finally built up some inventory. Inventory being about 4 pumps, handful of wrenches, a couple of sockets. That's how I started. Beside this shelf is a workbench that was, approximately 8 feet long. It was about 2 feet wide. So my first shop and my first, the first iteration of Cantork was literally 40 square feet. Um, and within that, I was actually able to do almost $1 million of business in my first. By the time I hit year two, that really, a lot of things really clicked. A lot of things really lined up when they needed to, and I just hustled. I hustled like I've never hustled before. I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would put on my shorts and a t-shirt. I would go straight to my basement. I'd get on the computer, which was still a relatively um, new concept for business in the year 2000, and I would research. I'd look for customers. I'd look for industrial accounts, and I would reach out to various suppliers. That being said, the day I got fired, my last stop was I had to get home and tell my wife that I was no longer employed, and somehow we we had to survive. I'll never forget when I explained the story to her. She did not, she didn't weep. She didn't, she wasn't disappointed. She supported me 100% and said, if this is what you're going to do, I know you're going to do it well, and we'll be taken care of. And that was enough motivation for me to, to really keep going. I got on the phone, made a few more calls when I got home. And by noon that day, I had 6 people willing to sell me product on credit. Um, I didn't even know what credit was. I didn't know how to run a business. I was only really a regional manager for an existing company. I had no clue. I didn't even know how to file for a business license, but somehow we managed to get that done. And, for the most part, with the exception of 2 companies out of the 6 that I started dealing with on October 26, 2000, I still deal with these guys, and we've got great relationships. The evolution continued. I was in that little shop for probably about 2.5 to 3 years when we were approached. We, being my father-in-law, as the leaseholder of our old building, were told that we were no longer going to be able to keep that space, that the bigger tenant in that building wanted to take it over, and that they were going to move us to a new location. My brother-in-law Mark was ramping up to have more influence in their business. My business was taking off, and we decided that we didn't want to be the victims of paying rent and leases the rest of our life. So we started looking for a place to buy, and in the mail that day. We got a flyer for the building that I'm sitting in today that we purchased in 2003. They being Campbell Automotive, they had about 65 to 70% of this building. I had about 30%, and away we went. um you know what's kind of funny as I sit here now is the section of my building that I started in, and I could theoretically still operate in, is just where we keep our toys. It's where we have our race cars. That's where the CRG race shop operates out of. That's where our racing simulator is. But that was Cantork for a number of years, and now we've taken over the entire building. My in-laws have sold their business. They've moved on to other things, but along the way, there've been a lot of highs and lows. I mean, our main supply partner, we had a number of disagreements with, and for both of our betterment, we went our separate way. Immediately after that, we got into the first steps into manufacturing. Although we weren't building anything, we had tools made for us, by an overseas company, that, to be candid, they were knocking off the tools that we were originally selling. Did a really good job in the beginning, but as they got further down the road, they started the tool quality just wasn't good enough. And the biggest problem that I had was that it had my name on it as Cantork instead of somebody else's. So there was nobody to pass the blame to, Although we didn't design it, we had nothing to do with the manufacturing process. When these tools were failing, they were failing in such a spectacular fashion that we just couldn't continue. Evolved even further, partnered with another company based out of Chicago, that had already started building some stuff for another company, but they weren't happy with their relationship. We kind of jumped in, and worked with them for a number of years, but we got stuck with them because, well, our ordering quantities weren't the biggest. We could only, order in small quantity because we were prototyping as we were going along, and one of the toughest lessons I've had to learn, is that when it comes to things like heat treating, there is science behind it, but there's no magic recipe. And with heat treating, it is a subspecialty unto itself. There are so many things that go into it, and nobody will give you an ironclad recipe. It doesn't matter how good the heat treat shop is. That you can ask them for a hardness, you can ask them for a type of heat treat, but they won't tell you what to do. So that was one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we had to overcome because we just didn't know how to do that. Skip forward a little bit, we never really got it right with these guys, and while I wanted to eliminate some of the issues, really around heat treating, and use materials that didn't require heat treating, they kept producing tools that we hadn't ordered, because they wanted to keep their machines busy. And the more that they made, the lower per cost of each tool was going to be. Although we didn't have a use for them anymore once we made design changes and wanted to move in a different direction. And while that relationship didn't work, I was really thankful for the amount of time that they put in. It just turned into a communication and a philosophical thing that we had to move on. And that's where we got connected with our current partners. For the longest time, I wouldn't talk about who they were, because I didn't want the people that are in our industry to be able to walk into their door and say, "Hey, I see you're making tools for Cantork. We want you to do the same thing for us." Or, worse, to have another company, hear about what a great job they're doing and then start filling their shop up, where we wouldn't be able to get our production done. But I'm quite proud to say that we work with Alberta Production Machine. They're based here in Edmonton as our primary machine shop. Herman and Bernd are both very good friends. We know them personally. We've gone through so many highs and lows over our whatever it's been 5 or 6 years, and they've really grown to support us. They've added countless machines, where this is maybe a little bit too deep into a first episode, but before we got introduced to Alberta Production Machine, their business was largely what's considered turning. They did mostly lathe work. So you put a piece of material in, the material spins, and then you apply a cutter to it, where our kind of componentry and our kind of tools requires what's called milling, where the piece sits still and the cutter does all the work. The cutter moves around to profile things. And from the first time we started dealing with those guys, they've now added 3 mills, including a 5-axis mill. The 5-axis mill does some really cool things. And again, if I can figure this out, this is an example of one of our components, which is one of the coolest things that we can. This was 5-axis milling. When the tool will rotate, it'll oscillate, cutter will move up and down. It's really, really awesome. Actually, in this clip, if I wasn't talking over it, you can actually, my counterpart Bird, who operates the shop, says to me, "What do you think?" I say something to the extent of like, "Holy shit, is that ever cool?" This was one of the greatest things that I'd ever seen. But with that, it's been awesome. we get to do, so many things here now in Edmonton. Very, very proud of our, our industry here in Alberta. And, unfortunately, when you say industry, there's too many people that take that to mean that it's a bad thing. I mean, we have incredibly smart people here in Canada, and just an amazing amount of people here in Edmonton that we can rely on their smarts and we can rely on their expertise, and we make such awesome products here. We have just the smartest of the smart. Um, with our partnership with APM, they've helped us so much to get out of our infancy and to really come to understand what we need to do as manufacturers. Really helped us with processes, and really helped implement my vision when I come up with a wacky idea or I come up with a concept that's supposed to help, or ideally help. Bernd is side by side with me, with prototyping. Our engineers have been incredible as well. But that kind of covers our industrial world. And as we go, again, listening to me flap my yap is not necessarily the most entertaining thing in the world, but I got to get this out of the way to move to all the good stuff later on. We'll be talking to customers. We'll be talking to our distribution partners. As I said in my bio, I'm not going to stick to a schedule simply because I can't. I travel a lot. I flew 170,000 miles last year. I was in, I don't know, roughly about a dozen countries, from Australia to the Middle East to Europe, across North America. In addition to the 170,000 air miles, I also drove about 60,000 miles for racing, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes we'll run this show on the other side of the world. Sometimes, we'll load things up and we'll run from a racetrack if we want to do a lot of race coverage. But that's the other part of the, of Talking Torque is we're going to get into the world of racing. I already do, like I said, a 20-minute segment on TSN radio on the Jason Greger Show, where we, talk about any form of motorsport. Like I said, I still work actively. I still campaign actively as a driver. I love it. I love being able to put my helmet on. I love being able to get to a racetrack and, and compete. I will definitely acknowledge that my better racing days are behind me, now that I'm, rapidly approaching 50 years old here. But, I still want to, keep going. I love, just everything about it. I mean, one really cool thing that happened during, last year's summer challenge is we had our friend Sam Goslin. Sam handles a lot of Alex's multimedia. He put this, this awesome little video together. Actually makes me look not so bad. Hopefully this comes across the right way.
Too many thoughts in my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love and that's fine. But local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things. I gotta just let it all out, I'm talking about the shit they've been talking about. Telling me I should do this, telling me I should do that. Telling me things about rap. Talking the truth and then stabbing my back, they will knock me off track. No, too many things have been building, been hard to deal with, I just been drinking.
Kind of funny to see Alex as the mechanic. Reminds me of an old joke about the Pope, who eventually got to drive the Pope mobile. Skip forward just to the punchline. When he gets pulled over for speeding and unrolls the window, a cop comes up to him, takes a look, walks away. His partner says, "Who was that guy? And why didn't you give him a ticket?" Like, I don't know who the guy was in the back, but the Pope was his driver, so I'm going to let him go. Nobody will know who I am, but they'll know that Alex is my mechanic. So yeah, we have a lot of fun. Within the world of racing, like I said, I'm still a driver. I hope I can maintain my life as a driver for a few more years. I work as Alex's spotter in the NASCAR Pinty series. So for people who don't know what that is, specifically within stock cars and within the world of NASCAR, we are mandated. Drivers are mandated to have a spotter present because when you're in a stock car, you can't really see. You can see forward, but because your helmet is relatively low vision, and what what drivers use what's called a Hans device, or they use some kind of brand other than Hans necessarily, that will hold their head together, that they can only turn their head about 10 degrees either direction. So you can't really see what's on your outside. You can't always see what's behind you. And what a spotter will do is, essentially be a verbal mirror. So we're in constant contact over the radio. I'll talk to Alex, from before the time we start through the entire race. Our other major role is we pass along NASCAR's messages. So NASCAR, they don't interrupt the crew chief. They don't generally interrupt anybody on pit road, but we have a spotter official that will get a message from NASCAR. The spotter will come and talk to us if we're doing something wrong, if we misaligned on a start, if we're not holding speed, if we're playing games, if our car's leaking, they want to know what's going on, if we just need to keep talking. So that's a big part of what I do. So travel, for there's 14 races in the Pinty's calendar. 2 of them are within driving distance for me, so I spend a lot of time flying across the country to handle that. And then, like I said, the last thing that we do within the world of racing, other than broadcasting, is the cart supply business for CRG. Which is really starting to take off. We've got a lot more people on board. People are starting to see that we handle things a little bit differently than they were done before, and that seems to be resonating. So I can't say when we'll be back. I'd like to think we'll do another episode next week, and hopefully can line up a guest and have a little bit more of a conversation. I don't know who all the viewers are. I know my friend Mike's watching, and I appreciate you taking the time. I'm due for at least one new beer here. It's been about a month since my last beer, Mike. So one of those pilsners would be really good. But I'll be available. You can always hit us up at Talk and Torque on Twitter. Happy to answer any questions. If you have a story, whether it's business, racing, or something, something in between, don't be shy to reach out. We can probably have a great conversation. This isn't exactly an exclusive club. Everyone's welcome, and look forward to shaking off a bit more of these cobwebs, learning a bit more, trying to get a bit more smooth with some of the technical elements of these podcasts. And again, thanks for watching, and we'll be back